Have some refreshments, take a seat. My name is Oscar Lopez, and I'm the current chair of the Academic Events Committee here at CAPLA. And I'm going to start the evening by reading our land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge the University of Arizona is on the land and territories of indigenous peoples. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being home to the Odam and the Yaqui. Committed to diversity and inclusion, the university strives to build sustainable relationships with sovereign Native nations and indigenous communities through educational offerings, partnerships, and community service. I think more than ever, this is very fitting, especially in this evening tonight where we're coming together to celebrate peace and to celebrate two cultures, a partnership, and a friendship. This event has been in the works for several months. We want to thank Sandra Bernal for all of her work. We want to thank everyone here. Everyone here for attending. This morning at around 10:30, Gregorio gave a beautiful talk on the work of Luis Barragan. The room was filled with over 120 architecture students and community members, and it was very touching. For me, it was the first lecture I've attended to on Luis Barragan, and while I'm familiar with the work, I'm an architect, I'm a faculty here, it is refreshing to see it through new eyes, and the way that you spoke about beauty and connecting it to the work of Luis Barragan and to inspire the students to seek and pursue beauty was very touching. I want to call up Nancy, who will introduce Gregorio. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Nancy Pollock-Elwan. I'm the Dean of the College of Architecture, Planning and Landscape Architecture at the University of Arizona. And I always add the proud Dean of the College of Architecture, Planning and Landscape Architecture. Well, thank you all for joining us here tonight for what I know will be a unique and very interesting and engaging lecture. I can say that because as Oscar was saying today, we had at 10:30 this lecture that was just fantastic. And I know you were really touching the hearts of those students. It was mostly students, although we had some very engaged community members here as well. But the students weren't on their phones. they were, they were just like this. They were taking notes, drawing, thinking about the concepts that are being brought forward to them, and welcome, by the way. I'm glad you're here. And it was all about that. It was about, for me as an educator, it was those students receiving your thoughts and reflections on the work of this great architect. So this didn't happen overnight. These wonderful sculptures that we have, the union that we are expressing here with the Sacal Foundation, as well as the Mexican Consulate, with the university and college. And it took a lot of people, and I'm going to start with a list. First, of course, to Gregorio Luke, who, on behalf of the faculty and staff and students of this college, I want to extend a sincere thank you and appreciation for your gracious acceptance of our invitation to be here and do two lectures, which is quite extraordinary, to the Sacal Foundation, namely the president, Sylvia Sacal, who's not here, but we are thinking about Sylvia, and Claire Corot, who is here representing the foundation for bringing this work, this exhibition, to the University of Arizona. And if you haven't noticed, it was also in the bookstore before this, and then traveled over to this location. And the Sacal Foundation, who brings this to us, and they support the cost of this, which we're so appreciative of, and also, of course, the presence of our esteemed Gregorio Luke to be giving these lectures. A special thank you also to Rafael Barceló, who is the Consul of Mexico. We've met many times and been in many events, really the building of this relationship, not only with the University of Arizona, but with us in this college, which I really appreciate facilitating that connection that now goes back years now, I think, that we're looking at, but also supporting the transportation of this exhibition, which is a big lift, literally, to bring these sculptures here to Tucson and the university, and fostering this relationship that you do so well between Mexico, the Mexican American community, the university, as well as the college. So thank you for that. And Marla Franco, who's the vice president of the Hispanic Serving Institute Initiatives at the University of Arizona. And you should know that Sandra Bernal has received a fellowship from the Hispanic Serving Institute and is a fellow, and has through that received funding, and has also directed some of that funding to us and to this exhibition. So I want to thank you because it aligns, as you know, it aligns with us in terms of the connection that we have to the community, especially as a land grant university. I take that, and I know the others within this college take that very seriously. And in particular, the fact that we are Hispanic serving is a very important part of our community. And then arts and design, and what we do in this college every day, and finding that connection, intersection that we see in this work. When I look at this work, and as it started arriving yesterday, you may not know this, but we've recently renovated this space. So $10 million later, here we are. And what we have really brought here is this transparency to this space, and looking down, and the light that comes in here to see these pieces here. I know we're going to disperse them after this show, but having them all together here within this space really, it's kind of a launching of our new renovation. So thank you very much for that. I also want to acknowledge Justin Dutram, of course, who's here, is a UA Mexico and Latin American Initiatives Vice President, who joins us here. And I know you've had a large part in organizing this event as well. And then I thank Olivia Miller, who's the director of the UA Museum of Art, and for her support in disseminating the information about this event today. And lastly, I want to express, and I don't know if all of them are here, some of them are, but I want to express my gratitude. Well, first of all, to Sandra. I know that we marked that, but Sandra, really, it was Sandra's idea, I think, and she started moving with this and said, well, I can connect these people. And as I said this morning, she is our official connector within the college, extraordinary woman. And we are so pleased that you had this idea and that you followed through with it and kept us going along the way. So thank you, Sandra. Oscar, I want to thank you for your leadership, for this guest lecture and your kind words. Emilio is here. Romero, I think I see him someplace. I want to also note, and this is being recorded and they may not be here, but I hope they hear this later. Brett Smith, as well as Eric, who come from the materials lab. And when I came here yesterday morning, they were lifting these pieces up onto those pedestals and kind of positioning them. And Angie, of course, Angie Smith, who's there, and Jeff Javier, who's new to the college as our communications and marketing person. But most of all, I want to thank Lucas. I know that Lucas worked with Gregorio yesterday to position everything, and I was speaking with Gregorio, and he said, you know, it's important that this is work that has to have the proper stage. And so the setting of that stage was done with Gregorio yesterday, and I know Lucas was very much a part of it, and his team. So thank you, Lucas. And now I invite Claire Croto from the Sacal Foundation to the podium for a few words.
I was not in the script. Well, I know. Thank you, everybody, to come here, and we appreciate Sandra's job. She's amazing. Without her, this couldn't be possible. And Consul, you, everybody, Gregorio, a good friend, a very good friend of José Sacal. Well, you guys were best friends. So he knows him very, very well. So the lecture that he's gonna tell you today is from a very close friend of Sacal. He knows him perfectly. He knew him very well. This exhibition we are very honored to be here, and this place is amazing. And with all my heart, and Sylvia Sacal heart, we thank you all. And well, let's hear you. Gregorio Luke. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. We have, I'm sorry. So Rafael, there's going to be some comments from the consulate as well. And then we will have Gregorio. So there we go.
Well, I won't take a lot of time because we're here to listen to Gregorio. But I really wanted to recognize and thank Nancy Paul. You have given us tremendous support, and I think we are part of this ecosystem of organizations that work together as a community. And I think that is fantastic. And I think the work of Jose Sacal reflects on that and the unity of communities. We have mentioned the beauty of his work goes beyond, goes to the meaning. I couldn't attend in person the conversation this morning, but I attended it in Seoul. So I was listening to the conversation through Facebook Live. We are broadcasting in the social media of the consulate also this conversation, so more people get to find out, particularly to seek beauty. I think that's something that all the communities need to do, to come together and to build new futures, better futures. We need to build them, and we need to build them with beauty. And I think that's what architecture is all about. So thank you so much. And thank you also to the artists of the United by Art joint exhibition that with CAPLA and the Consulate of Mexico, with the curatorship of Sandra, we organized. And several of them are here, and we're extremely happy to keep building this community. So thank you so much. And Gregorio, please, we are so blessed, and we feel so privileged to have you here. And we cannot wait to hear to the wonderful things that you always share with us. So thank you so much.
I am very honored to be here. Thank you, Dean, for your lovely words, and the consul, and Sandra. I also wanted to mention my colleagues, Claire Trudeau and Mario Torres, that have worked so hard. And I don't know, this morning was one of the most moving lectures in my career. I was just so touched. It was full of students. And they're right. I mean, it's the first time, I hadn't remarked on it, but it's the first time that I'm present in a meeting where there wasn't not a single cell phone being used or a text being done. And at the end, I mean, some of the students were just crying, hugging, and feeling that they too could be an artist. And that architecture is an art, and that beauty is important for living. So it was very moving, and I think that it's not an accident that we have this exhibit here, because it's the same theme. And now what we want is you, students of architecture, to see, especially see this work, because what Sacal is doing here is taking a bi-dimensional image, like a painting, and making it three-dimensional. So of course, your task is even harder, because an architect should make it
an environment, right? There's a Mexican poet, Carlos Pellicer, that said, fortunately, nobody knows what art is. Sacal has an interesting definition. He said, art cannot be defined or explained. It is like a spark, a lightning rod that for seconds illuminates the horizon and reveals what has been covered by darkness. So there you have it. And what Claire was saying is true. Most of the artists that I talk about, I have known through their works or through their words. This morning I was asked if I knew Barragan. I could have. I was alive. I was an adult, but he was still alive, and I didn't never know it. But I did know Pepe Sacal. And I traveled with him, and we went to China together. And I saw him do his sculptures, and I heard him talk. The greatest gourmet I've ever met in my life. I cannot imagine what it was to eat Chinese food with José Sacal in Hong Kong and try all the different dumplings. There's like, we tried about 9, 10. And then you can see him morphing into different things. He was, for instance, an expert in cloth. And he could tell a good fabric just by touching it. And I remember in China, they always try to hustle you. And one of the ways that they do it is that they show you a little book. And then they bring you and they make you walk 5 floors. And by the time you get to the 5th floor, you're so tired that you buy anything. I don't know if any of you have tried to buy things in China. And so they got us up 7 floors. I was like, I'm tired. And then came the hustle and they showed us. And suddenly, I see a new Sacal that I did not know, the businessman, who looked at the guy straight in the eye. He was asking us, I don't know, $1,000. I give you 400 and I give it now, and then not get me the hell out of here. And you got the deal. I was like, so anyway, this is for Pepe. I have a lot of admiration of him. So glad to be able to talk about him and just share his work. And right now I was showing them to, and he was very keen on touching sculpture. Even one of the Cervantes, you can move it. Of course, we're taught that you can't touch art, right? So right now, I found myself hugging the screen, because these sculptures are like my family. I've lived with them so long, Now, I also wanted to say of Sacal, again, to the benefit of the young artists here. I don't know, it's like oppression is everywhere. The making you into a commodity, a product that can be sold and bought, making you into a piece of merchandise. So, believe it or not, that happens a lot in the art world. Many artists make some type of work that is successful. And then the galleries start selling it. And there's an enormous pressure for that artist to keep doing exactly the same thing. And if the artist changes, they figure it's bad for your market. And many artists have fallen into this temptation. I mean, look at Andy Warhol. Same silk screens over and over, whether it is now or whatever. It's the same. It's so common that an artist becomes a manufacturer of his own work. What could be sadder than that? Copying yourself forever and ever. Because God forbid you try something different, then what if it doesn't sell? So of course Sacal didn't give a damn about the market and kept changing his works. And you will see here, he starts doing like all these torsos and bodies, and as soon as they start getting popular and commercial, starts doing animals. And then something else. And this constant idea that if you are not sincere in your creations, you're not honest. So if you're just repeating yourself to make money, you're betraying yourself. So Sacal, till the very last moment, kept reinventing himself, kept creating works that he believed in. And I think that's a sign of great artists. Yes, of course, it's important to develop a style. Sure, of course, I'm not saying not. You need a style. But you also need to be able to reinvent yourself if you so choose to be. And you have the right to be the master of your own destiny. That's very important for your happiness. You know? And so Sacal is an example of this idea. He has a very interesting background. His father and his grandfather were soldiers of Lawrence of Arabia in Syria. I think the grandfather was the cook. And they met Lawrence of Arabia, this incredible man, author of the 7 Pillars of Wisdom, a liberator of the Middle East. And a man who, more than 100 years later, his reputation is untarnished. Nobody has come up with any revelation that has tarnished him. Accuse him of being gay. What an honor. You know? And so these soldiers of Lawrence of Arabia want to come to America. And it's very difficult. Sacal's father, you know, there's a lot of British soldiers in Syria and Damascus, and he peddles what he can. He sells them cigarettes and lighters, anything he can. And he is able to sneak in a ship to Cuba. He arrives in Cuba, doesn't speak a word of Spanish, and is immediately put in jail. And he says, you know, that jail was a blessing for me because I learned Spanish. And I was fed, and I had a roof over my head. And finally, some of his relatives in Mexico get him over to Mexico. And he, like many Jews of that time, starts selling clothes on credit. So they go in they carry these big sacks of clothes, and they start selling clothes to people that supposedly could not buy, like the maids, and they sell them on credit, so they get 100 pesos every month or so. It's a huge market. Of course, you have to toil a lot and work. You know, a lot of fortunes were made like this. And so he was also a very good gambler. He knew how to play the roulette and play poker. He was very astute. And he marries Alicia Micha and puts a, Jose is the oldest boy, it's a big family, and he opens a store where they sell clothing, whatever. And in that environment, what mattered was the business. And it was expected that the children participate in the store. But the problem for José Sacal is he's kind of shy, introverted guy. And it was difficult for him to sell things. Didn't like to do it, was not very good at it. And so what he started to do was he did the how do you say vitrinas in English? The escaparates, with the kind of the window thing you put in the front door. The display cabinet, right? And so he used laces, this and that. And then he would tell me, you know, really, those were my first installations. And with the advantage that I had immediate feedback. Because either the piece sold or they didn't. So I could know if my display was good or not. And so he starts learning how to control how the people look at things and the objects and how to place them and the distance and how do you put something. So start thinking aesthetically, not with any artistic goal, but simply to survive, right? And of course, the father, he loves to draw and to paint, but the father had absolutely none of that. Kidding me? A struggling Jewish family and the oldest son wants to be an artist? To hell with that. Absolutely not. No way. He says, you have to be a doctor. But I put a little emphasis on the education part of him, because again, this is for the students. And I want you to see how you can turn anything into an opportunity. So here is this guy. It's a little heavy set, doesn't feel too good about himself. In medicine. And in those days, if you were a student of medicine, they gave you a cadaver, a real body, for you to do your practices on. So every medical student received his body, his cadaver. I don't think they do that anymore. And so Sacal learns all about the body from the inside and understands how the muscles work and the bones work. And he's the veins. He starts painting them in different colors. So he gets an understanding of human anatomy that no student of sculpture can get. I mean, a student of sculpture does not get to open a body and look how it's built and stretch the muscles and paint them and put them colors. So, and you know, he's in surgery and he's all these things, and all the time he's learning about anatomy. And then he goes into psychiatry. And I remember Sacal telling me how we all wear these masks, these social masks. But when you are in a mental ward and you see the uninhibited human expression, it's just another world. We're not used to see people that are completely uninhibited, that give you the full range of human expression. Oh, he understands the limits. He tries to teach these mental patients art. And he can see how they represented aggression with teeth and nails. All this is very important for him. And at the same time, subversively, he's going to art school, but this is like a secret. And he meets one of the great Latin American sculptors, Francisco Zúñiga. Zúñiga was born in Costa Rica, but did most of his career in Mexico. I'm sure you've seen his work. He is very important because until then, the only parameter of beauty was Western beauty. You know, you look at Michelangelo, Da Vinci, oh, is Western beauty. I'm surprised there's no more sculptures of Zúñiga, especially here in Arizona, where there is, by the way, I was very touched by that thing you said at first, the indigenous presence. I mean, I felt like I moved to tears by that. But he celebrates the indigenous beauty, and he does these sculptures of these massive women that are from this continent, that are non-Western. They're so beautiful. And so this is kind of the core nationalistic type of sculpture that is exactly the opposite to what Sacal would do. But Sacal becomes Zúñiga's favorite disciple. And I would tell him, what was it like? He didn't tell me anything. He just encouraged me. He didn't want me to copy him. He wanted me to find my own voice, which is a sign of a good teacher. I wanted to encourage you to find yourself, right? And most of the workshop of Sacal were people that worked for Zúñiga, kind of inherited the workshop. That is the craftsmanship of these pieces. Is just surprising. A lot of people that worked for Zúñiga later worked for Sacal. And so this is his life. His father has a heart attack. He has to go full time to the store. And he meets this girl, Sylvia Farca, that is of a much higher social class, that is much more cosmopolitan, is a woman that studies in the American school, is very fluent, has been in Woodstock and knows museums, knows everything, right? And this dazzling woman. Unfortunately, I think this is a piece that is lost, but it's one of my favorites. It's Sacal's tribute to Sylvia, his wife, and it's the figure of Venus with the hair. Sylvia has kind of curly hair. Can't believe, so beautiful, the Venus. And Sylvia, this gorgeous woman, she could have chosen anybody she wanted, but she kind of likes this kind of shy boy, you know, that has all these ideas. And she agrees to marry him. And Sylvia is a lot wealthier, and she comes from a family that make wedding dresses. They are the most important. And in a Jewish family, you are supposed to incorporate yourself to the family business. So Sacal now becomes a maker of dresses and a photographer. And so he's looked at these bodies naked in his anatomy classes. He has seen people suffering paranoia and schizophrenia. And now he has to take these wedding dresses. A lot of them are made in the US or in Europe, and he has to adapt them to Mexican bodies that are very different from the French or the American. They fall differently. So he has to understand, how does the body look when it's clothed? And he has to learn all about the textures and how do you use the fabric and how do you and it's been very, very successful, which is another element of genius of that guy. Like, I've never met a guy that was equally talented as an artist and as a businessman, and has this incredible capacity of reinvention. And so they're very successful, and they start traveling a lot. Sylvia kind of takes him and makes sure that he sees every museum, that he knows every country. And then their trips are not just conventional trips. They stay in New Guinea with the original inhabitants there. They go to China before it was opened. They live in the North Pole. They visit the Antarctica. They are in safaris in Africa. So this connection with human beings everywhere, all different types of human beings, is also a tremendous influence. And Sacal is able to be successful enough, but you see the talent everywhere. At some point, there's a fire and all the factories of dresses burn, and then they have NAFTA, and suddenly you have all the competition. You cannot possibly compete because suddenly the dresses that you were doing in Mexico are competing with products in China that cost 10 times less. And everybody would would have a nervous breakdown. Not Sacal. I remember telling me, at one point his business burned down, and he told me that's the greatest blessing. Because then he, in his travels, he had seen jewelry centers. And so he said, I want to make one of those. And so he takes this old place and he makes these tiny little cubicles and he rents it out. And he makes the first jewelry center in Mexico City. It makes him even more successful. And so then he starts doing these workshops. His first sculptures are of the human body. Sylvia, I don't know, she still does, but at the time, she had these terrible headaches. And so he does this migraine piece of a person that has an excruciating headache. But of course, it has been interpreted as many things. It could be suffering, it could be other. And then he works with the human figure, and then he started elongating it. And suddenly, taking the body and changing it, and doing, he does these torsos. They're wildly popular. Look at this female torso that he cuts and sets. And the male torso. And he starts to sell them like hotcakes. There's some of them in China, everywhere. And then he also does fragments of the body. He's very famous for his feet. And sometimes people think, oh, feet are horrible and they're smelly and they're all covered. Why would anyone want to do something with the feet? I remember I was with Sacal in China, where he unveiled the exhibit of the feet. And suddenly I saw these women, especially the older generations, sobbing feet. And then I understood that one of the greatest signs of female oppression was foot binding, which meant that a woman was forced to wear these metal shoes that made it impossible for the feet to grow. And this way, women could not escape the tyranny of their husbands. And so, for somebody to recreate the free feet in China was like the women's lib movement in the US. Very powerful. I could not understand that. You know, I didn't realize what the kind of emotion that we were provoking there with these sculptures that are just so beautiful and so meaningful for people. And I could never think that sculptures of feet could become a symbol of freedom for women that could not use their feet and were prisoners of that for the rest of their lives. And this is one of my favorite sculptures of Sacal. Total inventions. The hand feet. I can't tell you how many trophies have been made of this, handed out. Like, there's lovely piece. Again, something totally original. The foot and the hand. But again, to the depression of the galleries, and he suddenly stopped doing figures and feet. And I remember José telling me, he said, but Pepe, do a little bit more, it's going good. No. And now he starts doing animals. And the animals of Sacal are something else. He does them in all sizes, this shark. Once in Mexico City, they took all his animals to the zoo. And so you could see Sacal's animals interacting with the real animals. I wanted to put them in the cages, but they didn't allow us. But, you know, the horses, the roosters, the cat. And there's plazas in Mexico that have the cat and the mouse. Because these little sculptures can also be monumental. Look at the giant mouse. And whales. Loves these whales, and they have little tuercas. I don't know how you say that in English. All the bolts. And here you see a giant foot hand in bodies. Horses. He also did miniatures. Sacal was a great gourmet. He knew all the best chefs in the world, and he manufactured little necklaces and especially cutlery, spoons and knives. And he found a chef that he thought was particularly brilliant. He gave him a spoon that he had done. But look how lovely these are. He made a fortune just doing them in series and selling them. Also, Sacal is very proud of his Jewish identity, and he does these very dramatic sculptures on the Holocaust. Like this image that is a Star of David with a cadaver. Or this one that is made with 6 million stones, those spears. And then he got the spirits floating above the 6 million little stones that he did. But he was aware of things that were happening today. Mexico has been suffering an epidemic of violence. Porfirio Diaz used to say, poor Mexico, so far from God and so close to the United States. And you know, the drug problem. Imagine. I don't know how many billions of dollars are bought in drugs, 100 billion, something like that. And you can buy an unlimited amount of weapons right here. You can go out there and you can buy a Uzi. Imagine what that does to a country that is poor, where the mafias can have access to $100 billion and as many weapons as they want. What government can survive that? When you have hoodlums that are better armed than the army and have more money than the banks and are supported by the misery of our people. Slavery of the drug addiction that nobody seems too interested in doing anything about. You know, we have our kids languishing now, that hideous legal pot that is a narcotic. He took one of the best things of the 60s and made it into these merchants of death, sell you these pipes that kill you. All for the money. And so Mexico has become a den of violence, of crime, of mafias that are unstoppable. And Sacal reflects that violence in his work. He does these skulls that are not the charming Day of the Dead ones, but the awful reality of a country that is shaken by violence it cannot control because it comes from the outside and is financed from the outside and is armed from the outside. And all these weapons. It doesn't matter how many kids are killed in kindergartens. The weapons continue to be made and continue to be sold, and nobody seems to be able to stop it. That's here. Imagine over there. So Sacal does this mighty piece that is called Armado hasta los dientes, armed to the teeth. And it's almost like a biblical resonance. I mean, Cain kills Abel with a jaw. And here you have this jaw that is full of bullets and missiles. A symbol of death. But Sacal, at the same time that he denounces death and violence, can also do things for the children. And he does these lovely sculptures for children. These teddy bears. Some of these sculptures are there was one recently donated to the student St. John's, St. Jude, of young kids that have cancer. And he did a teddy bear with these beautiful, he did this teddy bear that has two faces. And so this is the front. So the teddy bear is sad because you're coming into the hospital as a kid. And so the teddy bear is empathic with the sick kid. And then on the other side, he's happy when you're leaving the hospital. So this is one of the few documents where you will actually see and meet José Sacal.
Well, a big teddy bear can be just what the doctor ordered for a sick child. And now there's a giant one outside Children's Hospital that brightens and scares the kids out. Now this is where we'll start shares a special story of Max the Bear. What child does not want a teddy bear? Ask the teddy bears and give them patrons and their families at Children's Hospital in LA. I love it. I think it's great for the hospital, for the kids. It just brings a great smile to them, especially in maybe a scary situation for both the child and for the family. I think it will bring comfort to them. For me, it's a teddy bear to comfort the children's. The reach 600-pound teddy bear was created exclusively for the hospital by world-renowned Mexican sculptor José Sacal. Today, the hospital had a special dedication ceremony welcoming the bear. This is the perfect home for this sculpture, and this is a perfect site and place to meet with the Children's Hospital Board Member Dr. Richard Zapata and Matt Rebecca spearheaded the effort to get the artist to create Max. The bear is to represent happiness for the children, and knowing that Children's Hospital is doing a wonderful job, how can you not want to help? The artist designed Max to have two pieces as children enter the hospital. Max will get sad when the child go inside himself, and the other side of him as children leave the hospital when they look at Max. He's a happy bear. Relieved is happy, if you notice the bear. And that's what we want to do, is leave happiness for the children. The teddy bear was named after one of the hospital's patients, Max Hernandez, who they say after treatment during lockdown. That makes Max the teddy bear very happy. I've been in this business for 40 years, and I've run several hospitals in my career. But when you come to this hospital, you begin to learn that you need to lead from your heart. At Children's Hospital LA, Leo Storm, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
So now I'm going to talk about the exhibit that we have here. I think it's, again, another example of Sacal's courage. Because as I said, he takes these famous, iconic paintings and gives them a three-dimensional, this is like the famous Grant Wood, inspired in the Grant Wood piece of American Gothic. And notice how he fuses the features of the man and the woman, and of course, the trench. This is another very famous artwork called The Scream. And what Munch does in his Scream is to show us not only the expression of pain, but also the landscape as seen by somebody in despair. How do you do justice to a piece like this? And somehow Sacal manages to give us the anxiety and somehow to recreate in the cut body the environment that it represents. Some of the works are a lot of fun. This is a famous Velázquez piece. And of course, the fantasy of a lot of men with what does the girl behind the skirt look like? And so he does a little opening. And then other sculptures that are just so famous. Everybody knows the David or Moses. Or the Mona Lisa. Here, for instance, he tries to recreate the smile of the Mona Lisa. Not just the smile, but in the form of the sculpture. By the way, you probably don't know this, but people know the happy part of the Mona Lisa, this girl that Da Vinci kept happy and brought musicians. But at the same time, after painting her, he went to dissect cadavers and see how the mouth was built and how the lips were built. And so he combines in this perfect painting his knowledge of anatomy and the posing of La Gioconda. Georgia O'Keeffe did a lot of work in Arizona. She's very famous for the flowers that she does. But she also used to do buildings. And so this is a piece that was just very difficult to do. I must confess that I didn't see what was so remarkable about it until Sylvia told me, what? That's a typically virtuosic. Anybody that could do the foundry and get the little holes, and that took us forever. And we had to do it again and again and again until we got it right. And then Picasso's great anti-war mural, Guernica. A mural so powerful that it doesn't have any place. It can happen anywhere, anytime. Not only in Spain, but do you remember that hideous speech of Colin Powell justifying the invasion of Iraq under false premises? And he did his sad announcement in the Security Council in Europe, where there is a replica of Guernica. And you know what they did? They covered it. Because the painting is so powerful that they didn't want to see, the American Secretary of State give his speech with Guernica watching. And so I think that Sacal would have wanted to do probably a larger piece where he took the individual pieces. He managed to do two. The Wailing Woman and the horse that is here. Everybody knows Frida Kahlo, and her most famous painting is the two Fridas. And Sacal managed to do the two Fridas. And I remember as a curator, we sent the exhibit to a museum, and the director calling me, Mr. Luke, have some terrible news to report. We've lost the Frida. It's just one. I already called my insurance. I just can't. No, it's the two-sided Frida. And then he gets to understand not just the external part, but the internal part of an artist. Modigliani, another fabulous artist, sadly died very young. And he was in love with this girl that loved him and died after he died. And she had this very elongated neck. And so Modigliani paints every woman with the neck of his lover. And so Sacal does this image that is a fusion of the works that Modigliani painted and his love. This is the beautiful lover of Modigliani. And you kind of look at it, you want to give it a kiss, you want to hug it. It's just so lovely, This piece of Cervantes that is now at the Cervantes Institute in Madrid, you could turn it around. Another horribly difficult piece to do. Just ask Mario. But you can turn it, you can move it. Napoleon. I don't know. I know I'm going to get a lot of heck. I can't stand the guy. I know he's very important. The movie did not do justice to him. But the guy that betrays the French Revolution, reinstates slavery. He's like the anti-Lincoln. He re-enslaves Haiti, And he was very short. And he compensated by riding these enormous horses. So Sacal, of course, was not going to glorify Napoleon. So he fuses him with the horse. But notice how he doesn't miss a detail. Napoleon used to wear these hats. He used to have these poses where he stuck his hand like this. And if you look at the sculpture, it's carefully done, where all the mannerisms of Napoleon's are there, the head of the horse, and at the same time, it's like a chess piece. Napoleon is perhaps the most brilliant military man in history. So there you have a fusion, a chess piece, a portrait, a horse, or the great mime Marcel Marceau. Probably have never seen Marcel Marceau. I think you have to be over 50, no? But this was the greatest mime in the world. He could simulate a space. And he did these things like he was boxed in. And he's been very much imitated. You see, he's getting tighter. You can see him in YouTube, Marcel Marceau. He's very. And so Sacal's piece has the mask, has the box, and has the character. Another lesson for the students. You're not meant to do just one thing. Albert Einstein, perhaps the greatest scientist in the 20th century, I don't know if you know this, but he was also a good musician. And he loved to play the violin. And some of his ideas of physics originated when he was playing the violin. And so in his portrait of Einstein, Sacal fuses the atom and the violin. And then he fuses Einstein with a note. He is a note as well. He also was very good at finding objects. So in Mexico, there are these markets. Mario Torres sometimes accompanied him to La Lagunilla and all these places where you could find old stuff. And sometimes he found things, and these were the inspiration for other sculptures. So, for example, he found glasses that looked like Gandhi, and does this portrait of Gandhi that is extraordinary. Now, Pablo Picasso used to say that people lie too much for lack of fantasy. Truth is also invented. What did he mean? There's all this kind of realistic school that says that if you paint every pimple and everything, you're doing a closer portrait. Not necessarily. It's a bunch of terrible sculpture that copies exactly every dimple and pimple in somebody's face, but sometimes misses the spirit, right? So Sacal was aware of all these types of sculptures. And so when he does his portrait of Gandhi, now why is Gandhi important? Gandhi was a man that defeated the British Empire without firing one shot. The guy was emaciated. He didn't, and he just convinced his people not to buy salt or textiles until the Brits left. He is really the creator of the non-violence structure. Well, he's not really the creator. It's interesting that the creators of the non-violence were people like Thoreau, Americans, the passive resistance, the refusing to, the non-cooperation. That's an American idea. But then Gandhi uses it. And then Martin Luther King takes it back to the US. So Gandhi had the strength of an elephant, but he was very flexible. And so the portrait that we have here, he combines an elephant and a man. And this big, strong, elephant part, and then the flexible, emaciated body with the glasses. Or in Cuauhtémoc, the last Aztec emperors, he finds this wonderful collection of spoons, and he does the headdress of Cuauhtémoc with spoons. It gives him a startling look. I would have never thought of that. But it's not disrespectful. I mean, it's interesting. And Chaplin, he finds the skates. And the most famous scene of Chaplin, well, not the most famous, cannot say that, but one of the most famous is one that he's roller skating blindfolded. And Sacal loved this image. Look at it. And so these are the roller skates. And this is his Chaplin. Lincoln. Lincoln is such a handsome man. I mean, now it seems to us. It is said that when Lincoln was alive, he was controversial, and somebody said, "You are a two-faced. You're a two-faced liar." And Lincoln looked at him and turned to him, "Look, lady, do you think that if I had two faces, I would be wearing this one?" But what I say is that it's so easy to do a sculpture of Lincoln because his tracers, his long nose, you could just bring in the ham, right? But Sacal does not put his face. But he does find the chains. He and Sylvia, the Africans, were brought with these horrible chains in this passage of death through the Atlantic Ocean. And Sacal and Sylvia recreated all the journey of the salt, the journey of the slave, coming out of Africa enchained. These were the ships lying down, tied, many dying next to the other. And so, at the end of the war, Lincoln decides to abolish slavery. That politically was very difficult to do. There's a movie by Spielberg about that. And so that is what is important of Lincoln. But even more, Lincoln has a speech that today is probably more relevant than ever, which is the Gettysburg speech, where after this battle that just so many people died in Gettysburg, and he can see what's at stake. What's at stake is the future of democracy, like now. And so he says, that he prays that this will bring a new burst of freedom, that these dead will have not died in vain, and that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. And so now, when we are at the risk of another authoritarian government, when everything seems to indicate that we'll get it, I would like to play for you the best rendition of the Gettysburg Address I have ever heard with Orson Welles. The recording is not very good, so I beg you to pay attention.
407 years ago, our fathers brought forth from this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition so conceived and so dedicated and long endured. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as the final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggle here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will no long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. But we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Another consequence of the Civil War was jazz. People wonder, why did so much and great jazz happen after the 19th century and at the beginnings of the 20th, and not anymore? Well, you see, all the armies had bands, and the bands were full of instruments. You had trumpets and you had sax, all kinds of instruments. And many of these instruments were later abandoned in the fields. So it was possible for a poor black kid to find a beautiful trumpet. Now it's more difficult because that trumpet can cost you $10,000, $15,000. But the talent is there. Now, if the kid only has his voice, he does rap or whatever he can. The talent cannot be suppressed. But this encounter of wonderful instruments and talent produces the greatest original musical creation of this country, which is jazz. And one of the greatest performers is Louis Armstrong. And so Sacal found one of these original trumpets of jazz that were abandoned. And so he does his tribute to Louis, but it would have been too easy to put him playing that trumpet. So he puts it above like an idea. And you can imagine Louis playing it. But jazz exists before in the imagination. You know, and I can do for once, I can do what Sacal can't, which is I can give you the real Louis Armstrong. Now, if Lincoln's Gettysburg Address is perhaps the greatest speech of the 19th century, I think that the greatest speech of the 20th century is Churchill's. One can argue that Kennedy's inaugural is also extraordinary, but I think that Churchill accomplished something that is hard to imagine, and that is an invincible speech. And how did this sculpture came about? One of the symbols of the Nazis, of course you can use the swastikas, but that's done so much, are the Nazi helmet, which is one of the most resistant helmets ever created. I was speaking with Mario Torres of Sacal's workshop, and he was saying how they found this helmet that was part of the German troops. This kind of elegant design. And it was almost impossible to pierce. And so the sculpture of Churchill combines the Nazi helmet and the rubble of the German bombings in Great Britain. And it's truly remarkable, the courage of Winston Churchill. If you know your history, you will remember that the British were not enemies of the Germans. And even you have Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of Britain, in his appeasement policy, trying to make good with the Nazis, even if they were invading Poland, in a shameful and cowardly exercise. So there were a lot of people. Hitler did not want to fight Britain. He didn't care about Britain. He wanted to go east. The Lebensraum policy of the Nazis was aimed at conquering the vast oil fields in Russia. That's why he invades Poland and goes to the east. And there were a lot of people in Britain that didn't want to oppose the Germans. They knew that they did not have any way to resist the organized air power of the Germans. And so there's a lot of pressure for Churchill not to go to war, to appease the Nazis. And then in a moment of inspiration, Churchill decides to elevate the battle. And he creates a speech that is truly invincible and that prepares people for the worst. The audio is hard, so let me give you the words. He says, "We shall fight them on the beaches. We shall fight them on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. And even if this island or a large part of it were subjugated and starving, then our empire beyond the seas, armed and guarded by the British fleet, would carry on the struggle until, in God's good time, the new world, with all its power and might, steps forth to the rescue and liberation of the old." Because the US didn't want to get in the war either. And so it looked like we were going to have a Nazi tyranny forever. That the entire Jewish European population would be exterminated forever, and that the Nazis would have a European empire with all the resources of the East and lead the world into a perpetual darkness and slavery. In those circumstances, in 5 years, the Germany army would have been unassailable. And so in that moment, that speech, I believe, saves the world because it sends clear a message to the Nazis that Britain will never surrender. Even if the island is conquered, it will never surrender. And it throws to the Americans the glove of this isolationism. So let's listen to Churchill in this truly invincible speech.
We shall defend our island forever. We shall save it. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. And if we are able not for a moment believe this island or a large part of it was subjugated and starving, then our empire beyond the seas, armed and guarded by the British fleet, would carry on the struggle until in God's good time, the new world with all its power steps forth to the rescue and the liberation of the old.
And so this is the tribute to Churchill. And I believe it's one of the most moving and beautiful tributes to Churchill. There's a lot of detractors of Churchill, but I think that the world owes him a great deal. Sadly, Sacal has an awful death. I remember he started slurring his words, and we had openings. And Pepe had to say, I'm not drunk. I have this problem. I think it's an issue with my tongue. Because he sounded like if he had had too much to drink. And slowly, the sickness advanced. And I don't know exactly what it's called, but it's one of these kind of Lou Gehrig things where you start to lose ALS. And Sylvia did everything she could. And they were wherever they thought they had a treatment, whether it was Korea, wherever it was. And in his last sculptures, Sacal was trying to recreate what was happening to him. His body that was, normally it begins from the outside, but in Sacal's, he who loved to eat could no longer eat. He started to lose his facial everything. And these are some of the last sculptures where he tries to recreate his membranes and his deteriorated brain cells. And even in this situation, he was honored. In Mexico, one of the greatest honors is that they put your photograph in the lottery. Mexico has a lottery that is very prestigious. It has done a lot of social work, very honestly managed. It's one of those great institutions. And for the lottery in Mexico, everybody buys a piece. To put your face at, it's like a big honor. It's more than a public award. It's like a social recognition because that means that 60 million Mexicans will have you and will eagerly look at the ticket, hoping they are the winning ticket. So they gave this honor to Sacal. And by then he was very sick, but he did not hide. We took him as he was in a wheelchair, and he was smiling, and his presence was still there, even if the decay was obvious. But he went there, and interestingly, he kept his hands to the last. He could no longer speak. He could no longer eat. He had lost most of the movement of his body except the hands. So he was able to continue doing sculpture to the very end. And one of his final works is his self-portrait, that are these hands. And he called it simply me. Thank you very much. So if anybody has any comment or question, and I would like to